Concord, which is Sony's hero shooter, is the biggest flop in live service history. When it comes to the ways that we can measure its success, being its sales on the Sony charts and its Steam concurrent players, this game is a failure on levels that we had not seen before. And you've probably seen about 20 different videos covering this and 5 videos of streamers reacting to some of those. But this one is different, because I'm not here to just talk about how sad the situation is or how much of a flop it is. I'm not here to laugh at them. I'm here to give some insight, if possible, into what went wrong and what developers can look towards to avoid this sort of mistake in the future if they are, unfortunately, still chasing live services. I also don't think this is good. I think there's a lot of people memeing on this game and saying that bad game is bad and gets what it deserves, but there's much more to it than that. The game isn't just bad, because a lot of the fundamentals, especially technically for this game, are very well done. It's a lot of other misguided things that are crucial to its success that were completely fumbled. And I just want to set that record a bit straight. So I'm Mugthief. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. Consider hitting the like button, all the usual. And if you're not new here, thank you very much for coming back. I very much appreciate you. Let's talk about this disaster. Now let me very quickly run through the facts, just in case you haven't watched anything about the game. Concord is Sony's hero shooter. It basically mixes Overwatch DNA with a lot of other sorts of DNA, but that's not really fair to say. We'll get into that. But it is a competitive online hero shooter being sold for $40. It has peaked at around 630 players on Steam, which to put into perspective is about 6,000 less than Redfall. Currently, Skull and Bones, which came out many months ago on Uplay, a Ubisoft game, the first quadruple A game ever, has more than triple its peak concurrent players. Warner Brothers' Slip and Slide Squad, I hate that I have to do this, by the way, we don't say the name of the game as much because it really is a flip of the coin if YouTube is going to decide to restrict your video and put big warnings on prevention of that sort of thing below. It is ridiculous, but yes, the Slip and Slide Squad had like 12,000. And Slip and Slide Squad, until now, when it comes to budget and development times versus the success it received, was pretty much considered to be the biggest we had ever seen. I think Concord outdoes it. Now, Concord is a first-party Sony game because it's made by a studio, Firewalk, that was founded in 2016, so very much around the Overwatch days, of industry veterans from Bungie and Activision, and there is a hell of a lot of Destiny PvP DNA in this game as well. They spent 8 years making this game, and by the time they had a working prototype and had everything more or less up and running, Sony took notice of this and decided to buy the studio out. A studio of 140 employees with an 8-year dev time. And Sony was interested in this because at that moment in time, with an article quote that I keep using in videos, was trying to put out, I think, anywhere between 12 and 14 different live service games. So this to them was a very easy investment. All to come out as a first-party Sony game with 8 years of development, with 140 people behind it and the Sony marketing machine to these results. I really can't find words that describe this. It's like disaster, tragedy, stuff like that. But how is this possible? And to me, it comes down to 3 important reasons that everybody needs to learn from within the industry. And then after those 3 reasons, we'll talk a bit about the effect of this in general. Now, the very basic first one is that this game is a trend chaser. It started chasing trends at a moment where it could have even fought to survive. It could have been a player in this space, but turns out that 8 years is a long time, and people are going to outpace you. And especially in the case of live services, games are going to improve. And that's because this game is competing in the live service market. This isn't about live service shooters or hero shooters. This is about anything that is dubbed a live service. Live service games want one thing from their players: their time. They want people to sink their time, and everything around them is designed for that. Continuous updates, stores that cycle consistently, exclusive cosmetics, events, things to become your one game, the game that you always log on to daily, every night, you and your friends, you invest your time into them, and because you've invested your time into them, you feel more comfortable giving them your money. It feels justified for you to do so. So the fact becomes that they're competing for your time in a market that is now very mature. So they need to rip people away from their established game, possibly all the way since 2016, that they have been investing their time into. These games that are deeply entrenched at this point, be that your Overwatches or your League of Legends or your Dotas or your Fortnite or your Call of Duties. And this is a very cutthroat space where you need something special to truly stand out. Now, normally one of the ways that live services can find their opportunities in the market is because somebody tries them because they're free and they invite their friends to try it and they like it together, and if that repeats enough, you create a player base. And that is why it's so important for these games that their barrier of entry is $0. But Concord is asking for $40 from you. And then on top of that is expecting you to spend more money on the game in microtransactions later on. Very similar to Helldivers 2, which seems to be Sony's approach, $40 game live service. Helldivers had the benefit of being in a genre that isn't very popular or explored at the moment within live service games, being something that's a PvE kind of emergent co-op shooter. Concord does not have that benefit, but it still has the prohibitive price tag in front of it. Now, even if they were free to play, if there's one thing that we can say about the live service market is that these games are exceptional at what they do. To compete in a market like this, you need to be the best of the best. These live service games, for as much slop as we've seen over the years, the ones that dominate are excellent games that, through many different avenues, have created communities and addicting gameplay that keeps people coming back and locks them into that experience. And this is where Concord's biggest problem is, in my opinion, which is that it doesn't have an identity. Already starting from the fact that it's asking you for $40, it doesn't know how to sell itself to a potential player. It doesn't know how to express what it is, because I'm very sure that the game doesn't know what it is. Before I said that it has a lot of DNA from a lot of different games, and that's because it does. It feels a lot in its moment-to-moment gameplay like Destiny. And a PvP Destiny that is actually supported would be pretty good. I like how the game feels. I like Destiny. But it also has a lot of elements from Overwatch. It has elements from Valorant and CS. There's even specific examples, like in this game, which is very highly mobile and centered on momentum in your movement, there's counter-strafing. If you tap the opposite direction of where you're moving, you kind of come to a very small standstill, which normally in a game like CS or Valorant is used to stabilize your aim faster. And that's not a thing in Concord. Your aim is always stable because it's a very fast-paced shooter, but it has that movement quirk in it. Its heroes, while their kits make sense in how they are used, are not very original. They seem to take ideas from pretty much everywhere and then apply them okay enough. But where it really stumbles for me is that the game doesn't know how to tell you what you're supposed to do in the game. You might think it's just a shooter and that's it. But that's not the case. The game promotes a number of different gameplay modes that feel very different from each other. Be that team deathmatch or kill confirmed, be that domination, and of course those feel a little bit like if Call of Duty / Destiny were a hero shooter, but it also has a round-based mode where you don't respawn that seems to imitate something like Counter-Strike or Valorant, except that it doesn't have an econ system, and instead it has the variants or the card system in the game where, as a hero shooter, a genre where normally people like to become masters of one character, you need to constantly swap characters because that is what you lose from round to round each time you win. But you can mitigate that by the use of variants, which are slightly tweaked versions of the hero that count as a different character for you to reuse in an upcoming round. It's a complicated system. But what is the core gameplay here? Is this meant to be a tactical, highly coordinated, round-based game? Is this meant to be a fun Call of Duty-like arcade experience by playing domination? Is this meant to be something that uses more objective game modes like push or control points from Overwatch? What is this game? And because it doesn't put that forward to you, it doesn't really tell you this is how this game was meant to be played, this is what we believe is the most fun way to experience our game, the sensation that you have as the player is, you don't tell me because you don't know, because this game just isn't properly cooked. And this is an extension of everything I was mentioning with the gameplay mechanics, where it feels like there's so much of so many different places, feels the same in the modes. But if it doesn't have an identity, if all it does is a very good job at doing many different things from many different games, what sets it apart? I'd love for somebody to tell me. Now, for me, the second most important thing still has to do with identity, but it has to do with the heroes. This is a hero shooter where the heroes suck. Now, I've seen a lot of people complain about their designs and how they look, or saying that they're pandering to a certain audience. And I can see that, by the way. There are certain characters here that I do feel were designed by a focus group. But by and large, I think that they're just bad, and then people are attributing negative things that they want to them. But the thing they're attributing is not why they're bad. They're bad for like 50 other reasons before that. The first one being that they don't have personalities that you care about ever. So I want you to think for a second about any hero shooter or live service game that uses different heroes or something like that you've played. And think about the ones you like. But think about when you started playing the game. Did you start playing it because you liked the lore and the personalities of the characters? Or did you start playing because a friend brought you in, or because you thought something looked cool, the game was free, you started playing it, and then, through playing the game, you started to get attached to the characters because of the way they move, because of the quips they use in combat or during matches, because the way that the game creates the atmosphere and tells you the lore while you're playing, be that League of Legends or Overwatch. Because I'm willing to bet a considerable amount of money that it's the second thing. I played Concord in its beta for 20 hours, and I could not tell you a single thing about any of the characters, and I was paying attention. I don't jump on bandwagons of hate. I generally just want things to be good. I want games to be good. These characters don't talk to each other as they are playing the matches. They don't do anything at round start when you literally can't move and you're just waiting for things to exist. They don't quip to each other. They don't make little comments that hint towards their relationships or towards who they are. There's none of that. And yes, when you do a lot of it, it can be annoying. But most of the games that you're thinking of that are very successful have a great balance of incorporating some of that dialogue, some of that personality, some of those little touches, from quips to the way the characters move or the way that they talk about their weapons, all sorts of things that slowly, through playing the game, get you immersed in the world and invested in it. Concord's characters had the most boilerplate, boring sentences imaginable that communicated absolutely nothing about them, with writing that was incredibly poor for those very basic quips. But they do have personalities, or at least they're supposed to, because the whole concept behind the game, and the one that they promoted it with from day one, is the story vignettes. The big cinematic reveal trailer, and then every time you log in, every week there's supposed to be a new story vignette of the characters interacting and doing stuff. But why is this outside of the gameplay? If this is a multiplayer game, why put this in the thing that many people are going to skip when they launch the game so that they can get to the playing part? Have we learned nothing in the last 8 years? You know how there's show, don't tell? Where here it should be play, don't show. Don't show me cutscenes where you're telling me, hey, look at these characters, please be invested in them. Look how cool they are, let me show you their personalities. No. Make me curious. Put that personality into every element of the game as you play it, and people will naturally gravitate towards them and want to know more. And I say this with so much certainty because I got to experience this all over again playing Deadlock, where I initially thought a lot of the designs of the characters, especially Deadlock is a game that's early in development, it's far from finished, from all sorts of things, be that textures or design elements of characters, who knows. But I did not like a lot of the characters just visually upon seeing them. But when playing them, when seeing the way they move, their animations, the little comments that they make, the interactions they have with the narrator in that game, or the interactions they have with the shopkeeper in that game. There's just constantly information that hints and teases at the lore, the background, and the relationships of all of the characters. I started thinking, hey, this character's really cool. What's the lore behind them? And this game that's early in development has the lore, but it doesn't shove it in your face and tell you, hey, look at our cool lore that's only here in the cutscenes. No. It has it for those who want to go looking for it, but it's confident that it's showing it to you for you to become invested and care about these characters through the act of playing the game. And Concord doesn't have that. So how can you call yourself a hero shooter? The next part of this is that it's a game that absolutely nothing that is happening in it is really worth talking about. Its aesthetic is boiled down to, it's like Guardians of the Galaxy. If there's not anything original in it, if you don't struggle saying like, well, it's kind of like this and this, but it's kind of unique, you should check it out, that's boring. All of its maps, while excellently made, they're designed in the most classic way possible, and they understand how maps should flow, how they should take into account some of the abilities, which is commendable, but also they understand basic things like choke points and power positions and all of these things very well in the maps that I played. They're boring. They're visually boring. They don't tell a story like they do in, for example, Overwatch. The abilities are very similar to things that we've seen, and they're not tied, like I said, to interesting characters. There's no ultimates in the game, so there's no potential for these clutch plays because at its heart, it's still a hero shooter. And if there's no clutch plays and cool stuff going on, the gameplay clips that people would share, the decision of streamers or creators to highlight the game is going to be very limited. It is just ill-conceived from so many different angles, and it is absolutely a tragedy. Again, a lot of people are going to say that the people who worked on this deserve what they're going to get, and they're humans, man. Like, I personally feel for them. Because there were people on that team that were just focused on making the movement feel good, or each gun shoot well, or on designing maps that then from the visual standpoint never got a truly unique pass given to them. There were so many people of those 140 that are incredibly good at their job, that are some of the best industry veterans that put together, maybe they took a little bit too long, to be fair, but they put together a game that feels just very, very solid. But unfortunately, they released that game into a market where solid isn't good enough, where excellent isn't even good enough. You need to be exceptional. You need to break the mold to stand out in that market. And while I'm sure there's people there that really, let's put this very nicely, need to learn their lesson when it comes to the design of certain things or the more conceptual ideas that govern over the creative decisions of the game, there's a lot of people, especially technically speaking, that did a absolutely standout job with this game. They made a game that handles correctly, that feels good to play, that has all of the fundamentals. It has like all of the tools ready there, but they just don't understand that they needed to build a house, and instead they built the worst life raft possible. And I feel very bad for those people, because make no mistake, when you look at the numbers of Concord, like think about Redfall with 6,000 players, or the Slip and Slide Squad. Redfall with 6,600 players, but it also released on Game Pass, PC and Xbox. So that's a lot of value that they're looking from the game. Probably a lot of people played it on Game Pass, and even then, plenty of people bought it and played it on Steam, and that studio got shut down. The reasons for it are a very different thing that I've talked about in other videos. But at the end of the day, with the internal metrics of what they are expecting, Concord is underperforming to a degree previously not known. The probability that this studio survives or is given a chance is very low. The game will probably become free to PlayStation Plus very soon. We will see a price drop next month. They will try and salvage it however they can, try and organically grow the game, and hopefully do some more transformative changes to give it a shot. But all of the indications are that it's going to shut down probably in a year at most. And all of the misguided, in many ways, hard work that these people put forward is going to go to waste. Now, I hope this video has cut a little bit through the noise and the memes and the jokes and the way that people are talking about Concord to really try and explain and hammer home some of the issues that I believe, I can always be wrong, but the reasons why I believe the game is in the state it's in, and that it becomes something more of a learning experience instead of simply just bad game is bad, haha. because there's more to the story here, and there will one day be a big expose or something. It is not a terrible game. It's not the worst game ever made. It's just lacking in a lot of critical areas. I always want games to be the best they can be, which is why I try and give them a chance, and I try to be a bit more constructive, and maybe one step further in a lot of the critiques that I do of things, instead of just bad game bad. But here we are. Anyways, I had to take my time because I really feel like the story of Concord and the reasons for it needs to be better represented than it's being represented at the moment. And if you agree with that, please hit the like button. Let this video reach more people. I do a ton of different sorts of videos. I do big, like, hour-long reviews on new releases. I do big hour-long retrospectives, and I do commentary and news like this on the channel. If that sounds fun to you, check it out. Maybe even consider subscribing. I've been Mugthief, and extra special thanks to my patrons. There's a lot of you, which is overwhelming, but makes me very happy. Thank you so much. And as always, I'll see you again very soon.